Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's edition of Keep the Mic On. I am Simply Sherry. As you know, we have been here every week in conversation with an artist of all disciplines. My week is called From Behind the Microphone, where I take time to get to know the person behind the poems, even though not everybody I've interviewed is a poet. But hey, that's the tagline on the segment. Y'all rock with me. Right now, y'all know we are live on Facebook and YouTube. Feel free to drop your comments, drop some likes, drop some love, drop some hearts. Let us know that you're going to appreciate this artist that we have tonight. I am so excited. This is a person, when I met them the first time online, I met them online on StreamYard the first time and fell in love with their energy like that. I was like, I like their energy, period. And I knew, again, at that point, we needed him here. So that's all I'm going to say before I kick it to the one, the only Girl Genius.
Hey, everyone. So I'm Girl Genius. Like, y'all don't already know me, or maybe you don't. I don't know. Hi, if you've just seen me for the first time. My week is let's talk about the ellipses. No, book. Usually books. So sometimes it will be other projects because I have some phenomenal people coming up in the next season of Keep the Mic On who are not necessarily authors. So this is going to be more fun. So I also have had an opportunity to meet this wonderful human being who's going to be our guest this evening. And I am super excited they're here. I'm not even going to spoil anything. I'm not going to spoil the word. I'm just going to sit over here and enjoy myself. This is going to be a really, really, really fun night.
Yes.
My segment, I usually pick authors' brains about book and process and all that good fun stuff. And I am first week of every month.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys will see me again in a couple of weeks. Until then, I am going to kick it over to tonight's hostess with the mostest, and literally one of my favorite people on the planet.
Yeah,
Indeed, KaNikki J.
Hey, KaNikki.
Hey, I love
KaNikki.
y'all. I love y'all. So this is the perfect opportunity for me to tell y'all, all of y'all, that this is the time that you're supposed to tell your mom and them, everybody in them, share the video, like, subscribe, say that we are on. It is time for us to continue with Keep the Mic On. So this segment today, I would be remiss if I don't say that these people that we bring on, they volunteer their time. So feel free during the show to tip them. Also, please, our platforms are not free. So if you would like us to continue to keep the mic on, you can go to our Cash App and Patreon. See how I made that rhyme? To keep the mic on. Thank you very much. I wanted to say that little piece right there. Definitely. I had to get my little commercial in. Mm-hmm. So tonight I am honored and thrilled to bring on this lovely host and organizer and founder of things and performance poet and slam poet and all the things. I am honored. I'm gonna read a little bit of your bio, but I'm gonna say I had an opportunity to see you in action hosting at SIPS last month. Clearly, you know how to do your thing. You know how to do your thing. So on the screen, beautiful Chibbi Orduña is a Mexican-born, Texas-raised queer poet and spoken word artist, founder of Laureate Border Slam, editor-in-chief of the Mixtape Literary Magazine, director and co-host of Words and Shit virtual talk show and podcast, a two-time San Antonio Slam champion, winning third place at the National Poetry Slam Group Peace Competition. He has self-published 2 books and was the co-founder of an anthology, Contra. Is that how you say it?
Contra, yeah.
Yes, but what you said. Texas Poets Speak Out. His work has appeared on a million things, but just some of those things is the Latino Book Review Magazine, BuzzFeed, Button Poetry, and Right About Now. So right about now, I'm going to give you the screen so you can give us some poems to start us out. So the screen belongs to you.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on here. Super excited that we connected in Baltimore and now we're here. And we'll talk later, but let's do a poem. This poem, I'm gonna share like newer shit with y'all tonight. This poem is called Diaspora, a Spiral. And the reason I call it a spiral is because it starts here and it goes here and then it circles back on itself and then it just spirals into itself. So let's get into it. I visited the temples of Tenochtitlan when I was 8, and all I got was this lousy imposter syndrome. And I have never felt more like a tourist as when taxied in the streets of my birthplace, unable to have a conversation without tripping into the borrowed currency of a colonizer's language, harboring a bloated throat behind this port of entry, 100 skies away from mis abuelos. And I'm suffocated by the realization there is so much of me foreign and undiscovered. How Cortez of me to gleam the riches of a culture and call them mine without a single callous. And I'm little brown boy wishing he were browner, little brown boy güero despite the black curly hair. And am I loved in a country that hates where I'm from? And am I hated in a country my parents abandoned? Am I the X in Latinx, the variable always trying to be solved? I want nothing more than to be a carretero in Oaxaca instead of an Orduña in Texas, rejecting the American manipulation of my Mexican 2 first names, too cumbersome for people to hold them wholly. I am becoming what is most convenient for the people and leaving behind la gente. And when we meet again, how will I look my ancestors in el alma and not feel like I'm breaking into their afterlife? And in their afterlife, I feel like I'm breaking el alma de mis ancestros. And how will I look when I meet la gente and leave behind the people that were most convenient, becoming who I am? Too holy to hold for people, too cumbersome to be named. My Mexican manipulated by American rejection of Orduña, Spain, conquering Texas, of a carretero's labor in Oaxaca. And I want nothing more than to be solved instead of a variable, the X and Latinx, abandoned by a country my parents loved, hated in a country that loves where I'm from, but not me. Little brown boy curled in the privilege of being güero. And I am little brown boy wishing brown didn't feel broken and calloused from every single call to make mine a culture and all the riches it gleams. And can I Cortez what I've learned and become less foreign and discover there is so much of me realized and suffocated. And mis abuelos 100 skies away were the point of entry this bloated throat harbored their language before the colonizers tripped into the borrowed currency of a conversation about birthplace, how we are taxied like tourists into places where we have never felt like anything less than a lousy imposter. When I was 8, I visited the temples of Tenochtitlan, and in the temples of Tenochtitlan, I am a tourist in the afterlife breaking any lousy imposter I was. El alma de mis ancestros, in the streets of my birthplace, taxied into a conversation with la gente, leaving behind the people that are tripping into the borrowed currency of what is most convenient. I am wholly on hold, harboring a colonizer's language too cumbersome for people with 2 first names and a bloated throat, manipulating a port of entry across 100 skies into my Mexican American, learning of mis abuelos, Texas, Orduña, Oaxaca, carretero, all suffocated by the realization there is so much of me I want to try to solve. The foreign and undiscovered, how variable of me. To Cortez, the riches of a culture, call them calluses mind, and I am little brown boy and güero. The ex in ex Latine, abandoning his parent country, hating his black curly hair, and where I am from am I loved, and where am I from? In a country where I am from, a country in love, am I loved where I am? Can I love a country I hate? Am I loved where I am from? Can I hate where I am and love a country that hates? I am loved where I am, loved where I am, a country in love. I love where I am from, and am I loved where I am from? Where I am loved in a hated country, I love where I am loved. Can I love? Am I loved? I am love. Thank you.
Wow. Talk about a whole a 360 of a poem. That is amazing, because what do we all want is to love and to be loved, just where you are. That's amazing. All right. Thank you for sharing that. You said that was more of Newer piece?
Yeah, something I've written in the past, I don't know, couple months or so.
Yes. Wishing Brown didn't feel broken. Yes. I am wholly on hold. Come
Yeah,
on now. Come on now. That's what
so
I'm saying.
much.
Yes. So we have to, of course, as an interviewer, you have to pretend that no one knows you, right? You have to pretend this because they're always asking you these questions, right? About how did you become a poet? Why is poetry? So I'm gonna ask it a little bit different, right? I'm gonna ask it a little bit different. Why is poetry the thing? For why is poetry that? Why not singing? Why not rapping? Like why poetry?
My background's in theater is where I started, and so poetry wasn't a thing until I discovered Poetry Slam, because that was the first time that I saw and heard writers of color kind of telling their stories, because before then all I knew of poetry was what was taught in school, and it was Sylvia Plath and Robert Frost and William Shakespeare, and that was about it. And so I saw this art form of spoken word and was like, oh, that's so cool. And I was immediately drawn to it because I loved theater. But being an actor, I was always like, well, you give me the script and I'll perform it, but I don't write my own stuff. And I become really good friends with a poet in Austin, Christopher Lee, and he was like, bullshit, you don't. You have shit to say, so write it, And it's something that I've very much lived as I've been doing poetry and spoken word for the past 15 years. Is if you don't write your story, if you don't tell your story, someone else is going to try and do that for you, right? And so I think that's what immediately drew me into it, was just the beautiful harmony of performance and of writing, because I've always been a writer. I just never considered myself a writer. And then I just love the magic of what poetry can do. There's just so much freedom in poetry. You're not as tied down to grammatical law or whatever. I think poetry in and of itself is kind of a hybrid art form, especially in the spoken word field, where you play with dramatic monologue and with literary devices and poetic verse, right? So it's this beautiful hybrid of art forms. Because you said, why not singing? Well, sometimes I do sing, and you know what? I can do that. Why? Because I have the freedom to do that. So I feel like poetry is both very liberating, while also, as I've delved deeper and deeper into it, I really appreciate sometimes the structure that poetry puts on it, like especially when you start getting into form and trying to like force yourself to live in a contained space. Like I really love, like haikus, right? How can I say the most that I can say in this tiny little thing, right? So yeah, I'm just in love with all the different ways that poetry can be. That poetry is malleable, and that you can morph it into so many different things.
Totally agree with that. So, do you consider yourself a performance poet or a slam poet?
I'm like, I don't like either of those, maybe. I consider I made the joke, a multi-hyphenated artist, right? Because I definitely consider myself a writer, a performer, a poet, a singer. I do makeup too, so I've always had a problem with boxes and labels, right? So I don't kind of put a stamp on it. It's almost like, to quote CeeLo Green, well, what don't you do? Fuck around, So it's hard to kind of explain it. So sometimes, to make it easy, especially for people that aren't in the world or familiar with it, it's like, oh yeah, slam, spoken word,
and then people still get slam and open mic confused all the time. People come to me like, I want you to host the poetry slam. And I'm like, is it a competition? No. Well, there's an open mic. People, they just don't know. They hear the word slam poetry and that.
Yeah. And I think slam poetry, quote unquote, that term slam poetry has kind of morphed into a genre that people kind of come to expect a certain kind of cadence, a certain kind of rhythm, a certain kind of topic. Like they start to come to it with expectations. And so that's why I don't like it, because slam poetry is not a genre. A poetry slam is an event, right?
Yes.
So I don't think people are slam poets. People are writers, they're performers, they're poets, spoken word artists, if you want to put it into that. But I think the label slam poet starts to put like, oh, you write this kind of poetry.
This kind of poetry.
You sound like this that I saw on Button. You saw like this, right? And it's not that. The world of slam and spoken word and poetry is just so diverse that when you start to pigeon yourself into that, I feel like you cut yourself off from exploring what you can do with your voice and with your writing.
Totally agree. So when people ask you, what do you do for a living? What do you say?
This now. Literally since July of 2019, I transitioned into full-time artist. I had been working for MAC Cosmetics for 9 years and had a wonderful job that I loved, and still doing poetry on the side. But then because of a series of leadership changes and mentality, they did an entire series of layoffs where a third of the company, third of the leadership team. I'm going into too much tea, but in any case, me and so many other of us got laid off. Who'd been with the company for so long. And, there's this phrase, the golden handcuffs. They refers to, you have something really great, but it's also holding you back. That's what my job was. I loved my job. I had a great time with it. I had great benefits, health insurance. It paid really well. I got to travel with it. I worked with really great people, but I was handcuffed to the job, and as soon as those were gone, I was like, well, this poetry thing is kind of what I've been doing for the past almost 15 years, kind of on the side, but it is where I draw the most inspiration, the people that I like to be in community with, where I feel most alive, is in performing. So let's do it. Yeah. And I had just published my second book. And so I organized my own little book tour. It was called the 2019 Fall Fun Employment Book Tour, and went to I booked like 25 dates and went all the way from Florida all the way down to Hawaii. It was incredible, and I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. And in February of 2020, I got signed to an agency, and we all know what happened in March of 2020. So kind of put everything on hold. So it's been a rough year and a half, just because any other plans I had of touring were obviously out the window. But that really did allow me to focus a lot on my writing and crafting and refining. Was able to do some virtual shows. But now that the world is opening back up again, I just came back from an APCA conference up in Chicago, which is the Association for the Promotion of College Activities.
Nice.
I think I'm up to like 20 or so gigs at colleges around the country.
Congratulations.
Yeah. So this is what I do full time.
Yes.
I just need to, get that health insurance soon.
Yeah, get some health insurance. Yes,
Yeah.
I know. And that's like the biggest thing I think that holds people back, especially in this country, is not doing what you want to do and not having that health insurance, that cushion. It's more like I hear so many artists talk about, it's not necessarily about the money, because like you're saying, like you talk about the golden handcuffs. So you're talking about, I know I can do this because I've already been doing this on the side. So I like to say, people say, what do you do for a living? I have a full time, I do poetry for full time too. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I do my poet laureate situation too, full time. I'm wife and mother full time, and I work. I have a full time job where I do recruiting and human resources full time. So I have all full time jobs, right?
Yeah,
it's all full time. But of course, the health insurance is a key part of
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And it's also, you know, how the societal expectations that this construct that we live in kind of like forces, because like as a full-time artist, you're essentially an independent contractor, right?
Right.
So when somebody like asks me for like proof of income, it's like, well, I don't have pay stubs, right? I don't have a payroll job that I know on the 15th and the 30th of every month I'm getting this paycheck.
Right.
Yeah. So it does make it difficult for people that want to live in these careers, you know, work in these fields that don't adhere to the societal norms of a 40-hour work week, 9 to 5, or whatever it is, you know, because I worked in retail, so 9 to 5. I don't understand 9 to 5.
9 to 5,
but you know, the 40-hour work week paycheck kind of lifestyle that is the norm. And so it makes it difficult to kind of navigate in this world when you don't live in that norm. But it takes a little more effort, but it's definitely still doable, you know.
Yeah, definitely. So let that be an inspiration for you people out there listening. Let that be an inspiration. It's definitely still doable. So let's talk a little bit, because I have, of course, this segment is called Poets and Platforms. So I definitely want to, before we get into the whole platform thing, I definitely want to talk about you as a poet, right? And then what goes into that. So let's talk about like your writing process. So because you are a poet who performs poetry, right? Do you write, when you're writing, are you writing with the expectation of performing that? Or do you write, like, basically, do you write for the page or do you write for the stage? Or you always write for the page and then sometimes it's work for the stage? Okay.
Right. It's interesting because since my background's in theater, I always write, like as I write, I have to say it out loud because I need to know how it sounds, you know, and anything can be read on stage. You know, absolutely anything. You know, we see haikus, right? Or any poem can be read on a stage. It's up to the poet to bring it to life on the stage however they want to, right? But I definitely write very consciously about how it sounds auditorily. And I think that's just because that's how my brain works, and that's my background is in theater. And so I have to know how it sounds. So as I'm writing, I'll go back and read it out loud. Right. And then edit and then read it out loud again. And then, you know, I stand up and read. And how does it feel now? And what feels cumbersome in my mouth, right? As I'm saying it, ooh, these words are not working. I need to change. Something here feels wrong in my mouth. So I definitely, that's one of the things I've loved about poetry is that poetry comes from a history of oral tradition, right? Poetry is meant to be spoken out loud. So that usually is the driving force behind writing and editing. And then more and more these days, I'm like, okay, but now how can I play with this on the page? How can I make it sing? Because I've definitely gotten, it's been told to me, I was like, I love your work. I don't feel it as much when I read it. I was like,
interesting. Okay.
This was told to me by someone very, 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 very close to me. So I don't fault him for it. He's a very, I'm not going to out my father like that, but he's a very honest person. You know, so that's where I've started to play with like, okay, how can I make it sing on the page, right? If you can't hear me say it, how can, when you read it, you hear how I want you to read it? And then how can I start hiding other little gems in there, the double entendres that happen when you use enjambment very strategically, you know, the way that you format it on the page. What happens when you put it into couplets versus what happens when you put it into quatrains, and you know, all sorts of, I start geeking out over it. So there's multiple layers to it. You know, writing's the easy part. Editing is the hard part.
Yes, editing is the hard part. So do you think, how important is memorizing? Do we need to memorize our poetry? Does it all have to be memorized? Can we read from the page?
Yes, you can read from the page. Absolutely. I won, like, the pandemic doing all these virtual shows. I basically had a teleprompter for any time I performed, right? Because why? I'm staring at a screen, right? And my screen has my poetry on it. You can't see it. You see me,
right?
So I kind of got lazy in the whole memorizing thing, And as I started doing live shows again, I was like, ooh, she's a bit rusty. Okay, let's get it. But I do think that when you have the work memorized to the level where you can just drop into a poem at any line and you know it, right? You can be someone could be having a conversation and you could just be reciting your poetry. Once you get it that ingrained in your body, there's something that happens to the poem, right? Because first you read the poem, then you can perform the poem. But once you have it to that level where it's in your body, then you're actually living the poem every time that you are reciting it, you know? And so I love what happens when a poet gets to sit in the poem, right? Versus when you're reading it, or if it's like freshly memorized, that you're still like in your head, like, oh, what's the next line? Okay, I got
What's
it.
the next line?
Yeah. So I think something magical happens when you reach that level of comfort with your own work. But I also don't fault people for just reading it. You know, you can still bring magic to it.
Yeah, people ask that all the time. That's why I asked that question to you. You know, more of a seasoned poet or whatever. But I try to say, and I think Sherry talks about this all the time. There are people, you know, earlier poets, you know, and they're like, you know, they're newer poets, and they're saying, how do you memorize? What's your formula for memorization, and you know, how does it happen? Well, for me, I always, like you're talking about being able to sit in that poem. I think what happens is, for me, knowing the poem helps me connect better to the audience, right? Because now I can look at you. I don't have to look at the paper, right? And I also have noticed, like, things that I do, I can make people do it. So now everybody's going to try it, right? So now, like, if I'm saying, like, I have this piece and I say, well, children copy what they see. And then people do this with me as well. You know what I'm saying? Or like, if you smile, people smile. You know what I mean? So like, it's a connection that you have. Being able to speak, you're speaking to the audience instead of looking at the paper. So like, that kind of makes me nervous too.
Yeah, and that's our job as poets, right? Is to find the connections. You know, find the connections between people, find the connections between ideas and people, times, and all of that. Like, we're making those connections in our work. So sometimes I feel like we're doing a disservice when we've made all this wonderful connection and then we're like this,
right?
You know, so there's that extra layer. And it's so funny you mentioned the memorizing thing. Like, again, I've been doing these college conferences, and at not this one, but the one before it, a whole bunch of kids came, and I call them kids because I'm in my 30s and these are 18, 19, 20-year-olds. They're kids. No disrespect, but they, you know, like, to be young. These kids come up to me and they're like, so like, wow, you like talked for 10 minutes.
Right.
And had it all memorized. And you didn't say once. And how do you do that? And I'm like, repetition.
Right.
Something that, you know, like, because we've been doing this for a while, just comes like, okay, I got to memorize a poem. Let's go. Versus when people are being introduced to things like that, it's like, how do you just, like, it's a thing. It's part of, you know, it's part of the job. You know, if you're a basketball player, you don't just make 3-pointers. I don't know sports. Make 3-pointers. You know, the first time you go hit the court, right? You got practice. Practice is part of the job. People only see the polished work at the end, and don't realize that there are hours and days and weeks devoted to creating this 10-minute snippet that you got to see.
That's the truth. That is the truth. And you know, they are, I think, kids, but you know, they like young adults.
They totally are. They totally are.
they like to be called that. You know?
Yeah, they totally are. And I love meeting them. They're just so passionate and so full of drive, and like have ideas as to what they want in life and the future. And I get inspired every time that I work. I work with young adults and I work with kids, you know, like middle school, high school. And just, it's always inspiring to be around the next generation, because it's like, okay, I think I have faith in the future if y'all are the ones driving the boat. So
I hope they see this. Like, you know, you have faith in them. So we talked a little bit about, like, you know, being lazy and the internet and doing it. And I will say that I'm happy that during this whole time, I'm happy that, you know, we were in the time where we could do this virtually. You know what I mean? Because if this would have happened a decade ago, like
Yeah.
we wouldn't have been able to have this, right?
I
So
mean, do you remember the Spanish flu of the 1910s? They did not have Netflix.
Right. They had nothing, right? So it's good that we were able to connect, and I connected with a lot of different people. So I'm actually thankful for having those online time and having time.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, do you think that the internet contributes to the well-being of poetry?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I do. And also I don't. I'm a Gemini. So let's just start there. I can't make up my mind about it. So two very, very interesting things happened at the start of the pandemic. Our world got super small, right? For some of us, it became the four walls, and that's it. That was our whole world. But at the same time, our world expanded so much because there was such a shift to digital and to virtual. You know, I got to take writing workshops with people that I thought I would have been able to be in community with. You know, Patricia Smith, Edward Corral, and Buddy Wakefield. Like so many amazing people that, you know, because of geography, I never thought I'd be in community with them, and I got the opportunity to do that because of the shift to digital. You know, and that was the driving force behind some of the platforms that we started during the pandemic that we can jump into later. Was about this idea of, you know, like bridging the gaps in communities, right, and still connecting people. So absolutely, I think that digital and virtual spaces have allowed us to kind of like expand the communities that we have and the people that we touch. But on the flip side, I also think that, you know, everything has two sides, right? I think we're on YouTube, so maybe I shouldn't trash talk YouTube. But you know, like YouTube and Instagram, I think did the same thing to the makeup industry. Absolutely ruined it, but also expanded it, right? Because now people have all this access to things, and you start to again pigeonhole, right? The idea of like what a slam poet is.
Yes,
right. So now people are like, oh, you do slam poetry, you must sound like so and so, you know. And it's like, well, that's all you found. So it starts to create these kind of boxes and expectations. And then too, I think there's such a different dynamic to performing virtually versus performing to a live audience, that a lot of people that maybe got there kind of came out of the woodworks during the virtual shift, as the world starts to open up, might not be ready for the in-person thing. There might be a serious awakening as to what it is to perform in a bar, to a room full of people. So I think it's a double-edged sword, right? We get the good and the bad. So I don't think it's all one or all the other. I like to live in the gray, if you can't tell. So yeah, it's done some benefits, but I think it also can do its harm. And I think that's where people just have to be very self-aware of like, okay, where do you thrive, right? Because I love what virtual and digital has done for accessibility. You know? There are people that literally, maybe for health reasons or whatever, cannot leave their house. And so all these open mics that were happening wherever they were happening at your local bar, they physically could not attend, and now they can, right? They can connect. So I do appreciate what virtual and digital has done for accessibility to poetry, for sure.
Cool, awesome. So, how long have you been hosting?
Oh, this is a good question. What year are we in? What is time? I would say solidly 11 years now.
Yeah. 11 years?
Yeah,
So poetry about a little bit over 15 years?
About 15 years. I think I started in poetry around 2006-ish. But didn't start hosting until 2010 when I moved back to my hometown and started a poetry slam scene there. And that's where I started regularly hosting.
Cool. Okay. So I saw you hosting, as I said earlier. at SIPS, which is the Stonewall International Poetry Slam.
Mhm.
I saw you hosting there, and you looked like you knew what you were doing, right? You were
Yeah.
very good at. You're very good at.
She's been around for a while.
Yes.
She
So
may or may not have been called one of the top 3 hosts in the South. I don't know, maybe.
okay. So what is, and tell this to the people now for the new, this is for the new hostess and hostesses and things, right? Tell the people, what is the job of the host?
To move the show along. The show is not about the host. I've been to a number of open mics and such where it's like it's a 2-hour show, but an hour and 15 minutes of that is the host talking, and it's like, bro, I ain't here for you. I came for the poetry.
Thank
So yeah,
you.
the job of the host is to move the show along in a way that is engaging. You still have to engage your audience. You have to engage your audience. You have to move the show along, and you have to uplift your performers, whoever they are, whether it's a slam or an open mic, or whatever, like, because I've hosted events that are not poetry related. Again, your job is to shine the spotlight on whoever the event is about. Right. So you kind of have to remove yourself from all that. My hometown is Laredo, Texas. It's not a town. It's an actual city. There's hundreds of thousands of people that live there. Right on the border of Texas and Mexico, just to answer that question. But yeah, you have to be excellent at making everybody else look excellent. That's your job.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I try to tell people, they just don't get it, They don't get it. So I'm glad that you told them. You told them good. I'm gonna have to take all the clips of everybody who I've asked this question to and put it in one clip for the end of the year. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
And I always tell people, because I've hosted hosting workshops in the past, like how to host.
Oh, nice.
And so I tell people, take whatever makes you uniquely you and just do that times 300. So like, I'm a very awkward person. And so when I'm hosting, I just accept the awkwardness and be even more awkward. And that's my hosting style, right? Because that's what comes naturally to me. So rather than trying to fight it to be, I don't know, Ryan Seacrest or someone else, right? Like, I'm just going to be me times 300. So you get the amplified version of who I naturally am. So that's the secret to good hosting. Just be you.
I love it. Just be you times 300.
Yeah.
That's it.
And vodka Red Bull.
Yes. So since we brought up Laredo, so Laredo Border Slam,
yes,
Poetry Incorporated is a nonprofit organization dedicated to encouraging the freedom of speech and expression through the creation and performance of slam poetry. Okay, when did you start this nonprofit, and why a nonprofit, and why not a for-profit?
Yeah, so I started in 2010. I moved back to Laredo, like I said, from college. I went to college in Austin. I made a series of very bad choices while I was there that landed me with a very serious drug addiction. And so to get out of that, I, went to detox, went to rehab, and, they say change people, places, things. So it's like, obviously not going back to Austin, moved back home, get my life together. Right. And so in trying to get my life together, it's like, okay, well, what did I have in my life pre-drug addiction? And there was theater and there was poetry. And there was, I don't want to say there was no poetry in Laredo, because that's not true, but there wasn't like a regularly happening poetry event. There was definitely no poetry slams of any sorts. And so, I started it mostly because I needed to stay sober. I needed to stay clean. So it's like, all right, here's something to dedicate all my time to. And it's great. And it's something I love. And I'm bringing something new to the city of Laredo. And so for the first month or so, it was kind of the Chibbi show. I would like be hosting and be like, anybody want to come on the microphone?
Yes. No. There.
Okay, so I'm going to do another poem. And then eventually I got three poets and 3 people that agreed to be judges. And I was like, okay, we're having a slam.
Okay.
And then it took off, and I tapped every favor and resources I had, because again, like, I didn't know what poetry could be until I went to Austin and discovered poetry slams. So I every friend I had, I was like, hey, come feature in Laredo. Please help me show the people of Laredo the potential of what poetry could be. And then we built a beautiful scene that was just so rich and so community focused, so community driven, that really nurtured and upheld the poets. Again, I had no budget, so it was like, I can't pay you, but I can feed you. We will go to Taco Palenque, okay? And I can house you. All right, we will have a place to sleep. So please come. And it was such a genuine, wonderful scene that as my friends went back to wherever they came from, and other poets starting to tour through Texas, everyone was like, yo, you got to hit up Laredo. You have to hit up Laredo. You know, like, it's totally out of the way from everywhere else, but go, you will not regret it. You'll have such a great time. The audience is awesome. The host is awesome. They'll take care of you, all of that. And so we had so many incredible poets that were just touring through Texas that it was like, that just stopped by Laredo and helped the scene grow, from, me and 7 people in the audience to one finals night. I think we had 300 people in the audience.
Wow.
And we ended up hosting Southwest Shootout one year. So poets from all across the country came and competed in Laredo, in our little border city. So my entire work in that was just starting it and getting it going and creating a quality product. I got a promotion and then moved to Houston. And that's where I handed the organization over to my sister.
Nice.
Who has a master's in public administration, and she is the one that championed it into becoming an actual 501c3 nonprofit.
Right.
So I take zero credit for it.
Gotcha.
But she was the one that made that happen. Shout out to Julia. And kind of like moved it in that direction and continued it to grow it, because I think when you asked why a nonprofit and why not for profit, because the profit was not the point. The point was the poetry, right? Making it a nonprofit allowed it to, I can't speak too much on it because it wasn't my avenue, but it allowed it to, one, have a sense of legitimacy to it, and two, allowed it to better find funding, right? To help keep it going. So props to her and the work that she did in establishing that. I just laid the foundation. She built the house.
Love it. I love that. So you have a talk show.
I do.
Called Words and Shit. This is the current talk show that you do, right?
Yeah. Actually, our season 3 finale is on Tuesday. Tune in, people.
Yes, I'm gonna have to do it. So what is this about? Okay, so I haven't. So you're definitely new to me. I met you about a month ago, right? Yeah. So you're definitely new to me. So I'm looking up all the stuff about you. So I was like, words and shit. Why is it words and shit? What's I know what words are, but it can be anything. So, tell me about the other part. Like, what is this about? Yeah.
So I'm in San Antonio currently, and one of the beautiful things about San Antonio is we don't take ourselves too seriously. We like to have fun, and so the pandemic happened, right? March, the whole world shut down. And so this is in collaboration with a nonprofit that I work with here called Write Art Out. And so we were like, all right, what are we going to do? Our weekly open mics. Okay, I guess we're doing them on Zoom now. And for years, I was like, I want to start a podcast. And so I really spearheaded and was like, we are doing this now. What are we going to call it? And somebody just on the group chat was like, words and shit. I was like, you so right. Because we're going to talk about the words, right? The poetry. But then we're going to talk about the shit, whatever the shit is. And the tagline is to get to know the person behind the poetry, right? So we're going to talk about the shit. Whatever you want to talk about, we're going to talk about, because I realized that we know all these poets, but do we know the person? Right? I can infer what kind of person you are and the things you like and whatever, based off of
What you write, I guess.
What you write about. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a general idea as to who these people are, but I don't know you, and I want to know you, and I want to connect. Again, it was this idea of forming connections, right? Especially when the world shut down. I want to continue to connect poets with audiences, right? So we started that. We started the show. Don't judge us too much on the early season episodes. We had no idea what we were doing.
Same here.
Yeah. And again, started to just call in favors. So where are we going to start? With our friends. Hey, friend, you want to come on this show? Just talk about life, talk about shit, whatever. You know, share some poetry, and then let's just talk shit.
I mean, yeah. So how long? When did you start it?
April of 2020. So it was kind of like a National Poetry Month, and that was like our litmus test. Let's start it for National Poetry Month. Let's commit to 4 weeks, see what happens. And we ended up doing 35 episodes. We literally went every week from April to, I think, November. We stopped right before Thanksgiving. So 35 episodes, just kept on going. And then it was like, all right, do we want to keep doing this? Fuck yeah, we do. Yeah. So started season 2 at the beginning of this year. And we decided to kind of break it up a little bit. So 20 episodes, then 6 weeks off, then 20 episodes, then 6 weeks off. So we now, once we wrap up season 3 on Tuesday, we will have 75 episodes for people to go and explore. And we have poets from all backgrounds at all stages of their career, from established people in the world of slam to award-winning page authors, to people that are in an MFA program right now, right? And just released a chapbook or something like that, right? And so I kind of talk about the show the way that I talked about, people would talk about poetry festivals before, back in the before times. You go for your favorites, you leave with new ones, right?
Nice. So, I like that.
Yeah, dive in there. It's we have a YouTube channel just like this.
Yeah.
But then it's also available wherever you get your podcasts, Words and Shit. Go. You'll see some names you definitely know and you definitely want to listen to. And then check out some of the names you don't know. Because everyone that we've had on the show has just been so great, and every conversation has been so valuable.
Yes, I'm gonna go back and look at it, and I definitely know that the shit is what creates the poetry in the first place. Aha! You understand? So, you also helped to create Right About Now.
Yeah, I was one of its founding members. The story behind that, like I had said, I got a promotion and in my job with Mac and moved to Houston. And around the same time, Amir Safi had just moved from College Station to Houston. So we had both recently moved to Houston. And him and his friend Zach Hill were joking around. And I don't know the specifics of it, but essentially Zach Hill was like, well, what are you going to do now that you don't have a poetry event to run? And he's like, you should start one. It's like, okay. And so he reached out to me and was like, hey, I want to start a new poetry scene in Houston. Do you want to host for me? Do you want to be my host? And I was like, fuck yes. Because I moved to Houston not knowing, I think I knew maybe 2 people in all of Houston.
Wow.
And if you know Houston, you know that Houston is actually an hour away from Houston. So even if you know 2 people, they might be an hour and a half drive, right? Like it doesn't mean much. So I was like, yeah, let's do this. Let's start it, create a new community. He found an incredible venue in Avant Garden. We started in the attic with all of 20 people. And, I was their regular host for about 4 years. And I do, I don't want to take a whole lot of credit because a lot of the work that went into growing Right About Now is in the behind the scenes stuff, right? It is in that building community, and Amir definitely did a lot of the heavy lifting, but part of also building a scene is creating a quality product. And I mean, what you're good at. I know I'm good at hosting. I know I'm good at putting on a good show, making sure that the audience is engaged and entertained and wants to come back week after week after week. So I will take credit for that. But it then grew into what it is now, which has hundreds of people attending week after week. You know, and then into the virtual media conglomerate that it is now is the YouTube channel and TikTok and Instagram and all that. Apparently TikTok's where it's at if you want to be a poet, a successful
Apparently.
poet. Get a
I'm
TikTok.
not on TikTok. Are you on there?
I mean, I'm there. Every time I hang out, I have a conversation with Amir. He's like, "Why are you wasting your life on Instagram? Go be on TikTok." So, but yeah, that was the story of that. You know, again, new city, building new things, trying to create new communities. You know, I think that's we all. I don't want to say we all, but I think generally people crave community, right?
Yes. Yes.
So
Definitely.
just trying to create those spaces for people to come together, you know, and celebrate the magic that is poetry. Poetry is just the avenue through which we build community.
I love it. I love that. You just be dropping all the Jews. You were this is why they call this. Listen, you fit right in with us. People say this is a master class. You fit right in with that. You're dropping all the Jews. But since you're dropping Jews, let me ask you.
Yeah.
If I would come to you and say, "Hey, Chibbi, I would like to start an open mic. What should I do? What advice do you give me in starting an open mic?" What would you say?
Do it. Just do. Yeah, like that's one. Because that was my mentality behind Border Slam. You know, if you build it, they will come. It may take them a while. So that's the other thing. Don't give up. It's gonna take a while. You're not gonna start a show and you're gonna have 250 people in the audience night one. Right. Or you might, but then night two, you're gonna have 20.
Right.
You know? So I think that don't get disheartened.
Mm-hmm.
And then again too, like honestly, if you want to build a community around an open mic or a poetry slam, put more of the effort into building the community. You know,
that's great advice.
Yeah, the poetry will happen, but you have to cultivate that community. So get your community members involved, right? So people that come week after week, like, hey, you know, like. They have to feel like they're a part of something, right? They have to feel invested and appreciated. So it's like, hey, I see you come week after week. It takes a lot to put on the show. Do you think you can maybe help us next week by being our timekeeper, or, you know, like helping us set up for the show, or, you know, like, do you do graphic design? Hey, do we want to do, you know, like, you want to do our website? Like, let's collaborate, right? And as you start to build it, you get this investment from people because they are a part of something, right? They don't just attend a weekly event. They are part of building a community. So most of the effort should be on that, building community.
Great advice.
And then generate the show.
Great advice. And let me just say, I hate when people ask me those questions or interviews. You know what I mean? Like, what do you want to, what would you tell the inspiring poet? I don't know, child. What are you inspired by? You know, people always ask you those questions, but
I'm making it up on the spot. I don't know.
You know, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, what, you know, so where's the inspiring poet? Let me talk to them and see what they're interested in. Then I can give you some advice tailored right to you. Yeah. One size does not fit all.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about those questions.
We are making it up as we go along, you know, but then we learn from what we're making up and we're like, okay, that worked, that didn't, right? So we can impart that wisdom as like, well, here's something I did. And it might work for you, but it might not. Like you said, one size does not fit all.
Yeah.
So that's all I can do.
Yes. When you're featured, when you're the headliner, featured performer for something, do you plan your set or do you make it up when you get there? You plan it every time.
Yeah. So I take great pride in my sets. In that you're not just going to hear, you know, poem after poem after poem. There's an arc. There's a through line, you know, so I definitely plan my sets as one giant poem, essentially. You know, so I'm going to take you through, and this is where we're going to start, and then we're going to go here, and then the story is going to take a turn. You know, I want it to be a journey, because if you just wanted to hear my poems, they're on YouTube. Go watch them, right? But I want to create an experience, so I definitely take a lot of time in crafting the
Mhm.
set to make sure that it's cohesive, to make sure that it does have its ebbs and flows, that it has an emotional journey, that it has an overall message, right? What is the message that I'm trying to land with this set for this audience? And then, I'll keep a couple of audibles in the tuck just in case. Like if I'm feeling something, I'll be like, I think this audience can handle this poem. Let me throw this up there, right? Or maybe they want, like I think this audience is definitely vibing a little more of the lighthearted stuff. So let me sprinkle in a little bit more of that, and then drop the heavy shit.
Right.
So I pivot if need to, but you can ask my husband. I spend a lot of time crafting and refining and perfecting a set. And that's why it's important to me whenever I go into a featured space. How much time do I have? Because
yes, definitely.
You want 10 minutes? I'll give you 10 great minutes. You want 45 minutes? Okay. I just need to know.
Right. I'm the same way. And I'm looking at my time the entire time, right? And I think, and I think because being a person who organizes events as well, and when you have more than one feature, I hate to cut the other feature off because this person takes too much time, right? So I recently did a show, but I timed everybody. Like where I was like, okay, I'm giving you 15 minutes, but I'm gonna say you got 12, right? Give you a little bit of talk time, but I timed it. So I gave it to each one of them to say, this is how much time you took. Because that if you're a seasoned poet, 15 minutes, it's like that. It goes quick, especially if you say something in between. It's over with, right? Yeah. So I want to be respectful of time, and I want to be invited back. So I don't want to overstay my welcome. Yeah. So I'm definitely a person who times, who plans. I'm that person as well. So it's good to know someone else that's like that as well. Everybody's not.
And especially when you start doing these, like these hour-long sets, for anybody else that, maybe does the college market or things like that, where you're familiar with that, because that's what they want, an hour. They want a whole hour. And that's not easy to do.
Right.
At least not easy to do in a way that is engaging, right? Because I could stand up there. I have an hour's worth of poetry. I can just stand up there and I can just stand up there and do 20 poems and here's your hour. But that's not engaging, right? That's not going to get you booked again. So how do you craft these sets in a way that keeps audiences engaged and entertained the whole time? That's not easy. It takes work.
Definitely. What are you most afraid of?
I just had this conversation with my therapist. You are not my therapist.
But then you still have the answer already then.
I do. And I've known this since I was a kid. I'm most afraid of the unknown and uncertainty. I am most afraid of what I don't know. As adaptable as I am, I like to know what I'm stepping into. I like to know. I'm that kind of introvert where it's like I get invited to a party. Who's going to be there? I don't. If I don't know anybody there, I don't know if I'm going to go. I'm not good like that. Right. So I like to know what I'm stepping into. I like to know a few steps in advance. Like, okay, here's what's happening in the immediate future and in the semi-immediate future, which is what makes being an independent artist so frightening to me. Is that you don't necessarily know when your next paycheck's coming in, right? So yeah, it is that unknown. I think some people live life very fearlessly in that way, where they just go into whatever situation without any kind of trepidation. But I'm a fact gatherer. I'm a data analyzer. I'm a spreadsheet lover.
Oh yes, come with it. Yes. I love that.
So yeah, and no matter what the situation is, I'm going to do research on it before I even come close to it. Even if it's just going to the movies. Where's the movie theater? How long does it take to get there? Is there any construction on the way? Like what movies are playing? What kind of seats do they have? I'm that kind of person, because I definitely, I guess then maybe too. Oh my God, I'm having a therapeutic breakthrough. Ignorance. I'm very scared of ignorance.
Wow.
Both me, myself, being ignorant on something, and also encountering ignorant people that just don't care to learn.
Ooh. Wow. That just don't care to learn.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Oof.
Ugh.
I'm gonna have to tell Deontay about this moment. Deontay's my therapist. Shout out to Deontay.
Shout out to Deontay. How long have you been married?
We're coming up on our 5th anniversary this month.
Five. That's great.
Yes. We've been together for about 73 years, but 5 years married.
Yes, fantastic. Has being married changed your poetry?
No, I don't think so. Not at all.
Not at all.
No, because my husband's a writer also, and both of us have 2 very different styles and very different modes of operating and modes of thinking. So we see things very differently. So I appreciate having him there because he will see things that I will not catch at all. And he's like, "Have you thought about this?" I'm like, "Oh, how does your brain work that way?" Right. And I do the same for him. So no, I don't think if anything, it's helped, because of that, having someone who is so completely opposite in mode of thinking and in creative forming and in writing style. We have 2 very different voices. So I think it's if anything, it's helped. But no, I don't think it's changed my poetry at all. I've always been very unapologetically me.
That's great.
Yeah, which is great, but also sometimes in marriages you have to apologize. So
yeah, you do.
Yes.
Yeah. I before I got married, I remember this man told me. He said, "Always remember in marriage, in an argument, do you want to be right or do you want to be married?"
Yeah, sometimes you have to pick your battles.
I was like, okay.
Know when to walk away, know when to concede. I think compromise is, again, a very important part of a marriage and a happy life. Like not everyone always gets what they want.
Right.
Knowing when to concede, when to acknowledge that maybe you were wrong. Maybe what a novel concept. You were wrong. Yes, maybe you were.
Yes.
I'm not infallible. None of us are. So we're doing well. We're doing really good. Yeah.
I like to smile on that.
I know. He's in Houston right now, and I'm in San Antonio. So I'm missing my honey.
Do you know your poet laureate in San Antonio?
Very well. Vocab and I go way back. I've known Vocab for almost the entirety of my poetry career, so something like 12 years.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I met Vocab on interestingly enough, being the first African American poet laureates of my city, Alexandria, of San Antonio, and someone booked us and put us on a show together.
Yay!
That's how we met. We did a show together, and then I was like, hey, let's do something else. So then we did another show together. So I've been following her, and she's like, you're my homie now. This is the thing. So then I said I'm going to book her for this.
Yes, Vocab is one of the most genuine people I've ever met. And again, like, people only see the polished product, right? She's poet laureate of San Antonio, right? Do you know how long she's been doing this grind? Like,
wow. I've interviewed her. Yep.
Yeah, a long time. So she deserves all the blessings that are coming her way. So yes, I do know.
Definitely. I'm definitely going to get on.
She's my fellow 2-1 OG.
Hey. So for your friends, what do you appreciate most about your friendships?
Honesty.
Yeah.
Honesty and integrity. I can't fucks with you if you say you're gonna do something and then you don't, or like, I just can't. Look, I can't with flaky people. I can't with devious people. No. So the people that I surround myself with, the people that I have in my life, I have their backs and I know they got mine. And I also know that they will tell me when I'm on my fuck shit, So again, the honesty of it all. Honesty, and I think too, grace. I feel like sometimes in friendships, we ask too much of each other. And so I tend to give people a lot of grace before I cut you out of my life, right? I give people the benefit of the doubt more often than not, because I realized that we all got shit going on in our lives. We all got there's so many things, right? So many variables. To where if I need you and you can't be there right away, like I have a little bit of grace, right? Because we all have. So I appreciate when people give that to me too. But I think those would be the things, you know, because I'm a pretty easygoing person. You know, I can kick it with just about anyone, unless you an ignorant.
I know you were going to say that.
As we discussed before. Yeah. So yeah.
So right now, what are you most proud of?
Can I say my marriage?
Yes, you can say your marriage.
that for sure. Because marriage is work, people.
Yes, it is.
So I'm really happy about where it's at and where we're going. But I think right now it is words and shit. I think because of what the platform has done, what it's put out there, the conversations that we've been able to have with these incredible poets. Like I said, we're having our season 3 finale this Tuesday, and one of the things that I told the other hosts, I was like, all right, we're gonna highlight our favorite moments from the season, and like going through and just like re-listening to all the episodes, like, oh my god, there's so many good moments. I don't know. So I'm really proud of that, but honestly, I just think I'm proud of where I am in my life right now. You know, doing what I love doing, seeing the success of it, being able to share what I've done and the spaces that I've created. Like I said before, I just came back from one of these college conferences, and I literally had two students, you know, like come up to me and after my set and just start talking to me about how amazing it was to see, you know, an immigrant, you know, telling their stories, or a queer person just being so unapologetic, and like they started getting emotional and crying because it's like,
wow,
you know, I don't, you know, like I haven't seen that, or that hasn't been a part of my life, or, you know, like I'm struggling through this, or all of that. Like being able to be a mirror for people, right? To where they can see themselves in your work, I think is really powerful, and something I'm really proud of, because again, like I've always been unapologetically me. I write about me and my experiences, knowing that I'm not the only one experiencing things, you know. And whenever you're able to build that connection with someone, especially someone that is in these kind of like formative years of, you know, being a young adult and transitioning into their adult lives, is so important. So that always catches me off guard every time it happens. To where it's like, your work is so important to me, and I'm like, what? Really? Me? Okay, I'll take it. Wow, I'm just, you know, I'm just a Southern kid from Texas trying to make it in this world, not die, and cooking some incredible food along the way.
Come on, cooking. Yeah. So we know that you can sing. We know that you're a makeup artist.
This is also true.
We know about your theater background. We know you're a Gemini.
Yes.
We know that you're married. See, we're getting to know all these things, right?
Yeah.
Do you have any other talents that we don't know about? Or something that you might want to do?
Something that I might want to do. That's hard. I mean, I want to get back into theater more. That's for sure. I miss theater. I love theaters where my heart is at. I love being on stage and the freedom that theater provides. So I don't get to do that as often as I'd like. Maybe mostly because of my own fears. Again,
really,
I don't deal well with rejection, and that's why it's always funny to me whenever people like get rejection letters from like lit mags that they submitted. Like they are the nicest rejection letters. Like we really appreciated your work and loved the cadence that you had in this poem, but unfortunately it's just not the right fit for. I'm like, have you ever been rejected at an audition?
It's not nice.
It's not nice. But also I think too the reason I don't do a lot of theater is because like I need to believe in something in order to do it. And so I don't just go for any role, I was doing a play here a couple of years ago in the Before Times. And the next play that they were going to do was Beauty and the Beast. And they were like, are you going to audition for Beauty and the Beast? I'm like, fuck no. And no shade to anyone that, like loves the magic of theater and everything that it is. And like, but like, I definitely use my time in a way that like there's always there's a message that I really stand behind. The plays that I've been in. I can't do those sort of things because I won't have a good time. I'll be like, oh,
right.
I gotta go be Lumiere now.
Yeah, work, no fun, no creativity behind it, just work.
Yeah, so if something I want to do more of is theater, but I got to find it's about finding the right shows or writing your own. Hi.
Or writing your own.
I have a play. Yes. Somebody give me a theater to put this play on in.
Come on now. You saw it here first.
Yeah. So, and then just exploring what else I can do in my writing. I continue to learn. That's what I've really loved about the past year and a half is that I've really become a student of poetry, and what that can do, how you can manifest that, and branching out into other things, what you can do with your writing. But I do know that I'm first and foremost a performer. I live for the stage, live for it.
So shout out, I know this is going to be hard. Shout out to people or businesses or organizations who have, when they have booked you, they have treated you well.
Oh, the entirety of the Orlando poetry scene.
Wow.
All of it. Like I said, I booked. I did my little book tour in the fall of 2019, and Orlando treated me so good. I had like 5 shows in the city of Orlando, different venues, different audiences, different hosts, and everyone was just so wonderful. And I just all of it, the entirety of Orlando.
The entirety. Oh, I have to go to Orlando. Let me look. I'm about to tell my sisters, look up some stuff in Orlando. I don't know anybody in Orlando. I got a nephew who lives there, but that's it. That's the only person I know there. So
that was such a great. Oh man, and now the entirety of Albuquerque too. Oh, Albuquerque, just such good people, such good presence and energy, and talk about a beautiful landscape. That was another one where I spent a good week in Albuquerque just doing a few shows in the city, and they just treat you so good. And so that all of Texas.
All of Texas.
All of the Texas teams, Texas scenes. Austin has always been family. That's where I started my poetry journey, in the Austin Poetry Slam. Houston and Laredo obviously being a part of starting these scenes has my heart. San Antonio has always had my heart. Even when I lived in Austin, we would travel down to San Antonio to perform at the Poetry Slams here because it's on another level. Wow. It's a whole different type of scene. The people here have always felt like family. I'm a Gemini. Can't pick.
But it's good.
So yeah, Texas will treat you right, people. You come through Texas, we treat our traveling people right. And we're all family here. We all know each other.
Nice. That's awesome. So tell the people always want to know. First, tell us, how can we support you financially? And those who do not have financial support, what can we do to support you?
So as you see at the bottom of your screen, Cash App, Venmo, PayPal. You can always send me a little something if you like. Yeah. That would be great. Bitch got bills to pay. On my website, which is right up here, I've got books I got my books for sale, which I need to go and update because one of the books I sold out of. But I got books for sale. If you want to give me monetary things and get something in return, you can buy a book. You can book me to come perform at your event. You can book me to host your event, which is always great too. Whatever you need. One poem, 60 minutes, a workshop. I pride myself on being an excellent instructor. I know this. I did it for Mac for many years as a trainer. I work as a teaching artist here in San Antonio. I've put on multiple workshops. I do know that I'm a really great instructor. And so you can book me for a workshop, book me to come perform. And if you don't have financial means, which, we're living in a pandemic, I get it. Times is hard. Just sharing my work is always great. My work's on YouTube, or sharing my work from Instagram. I post a lot, because maybe you don't have financial means, but you might share a video of mine, and then somebody that does have financial means is like, I'm going to book this person to come speak at my event. Would be great. Just, I think that's, people underestimate how valuable it is to just share people's work, and talk about, put it out into the world. So do that.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Thank you.
One more question, and then I'm going to have you close out with the poem, and then I'm going to bring my awesome and amazing co-hostess back to see if they have questions as well.
Sure.
Is Chibbi your stage name, or were you born with it, or did you inherit it? Did you make this up? Did your parents? Who gave you this name?
So that is just my nickname. It is what everybody knows me as these days, and for a while now. So it wasn't created for the stage. It is a nickname I acquired, and let me tell you the journey. Because the name my parents gave me is Manuel Roberto, which I love that name, especially when you put it together with my last names, Manuel Roberto Orduña Carretero.
Oh,
I know, right?
sexy.
Yes.
Yes.
However, what tends to happen on anglicized tongues is Manuel Roberto Orduña Carretero. Not as sexy, right?
No.
So in about third grade or so, I had a temper tantrum because people kept calling me Manuel. And I was like, I am not an instruction booklet. So I dropped Manuel and went by Robert, the whitewashed version of my middle name, for a very long time. And then in high school, it became Rob. Which, I mean, no shame to the Roberts and Robs of the world, but that's a little too basic. And then in college, a friend of mine who was really into anime, I'm not, but really into anime, I've always been a very animated person. And she was like, you remind me of a chibi. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. She's like, I'm going to call you Chibi. And I'm like, okay, let's roll with it. And so for anybody that isn't familiar with anime, a chibi, so they have like the regular sized characters in anime, and then they have like the mini-me version of the character, and that's called a chibi. And it's only spelled with one B if you spell it correctly, but I spelled it with two B's and went by Chibbi, and it just stuck. Okay. And now nobody knows who Manuel Roberto is. Like when my official name on things is M.R.Chibbi Orduña.
Wow.
So Chibbi, even like when you were asking me, like, what do I call you? I'm like, just Chibbi. I'm like Cher or Shakira. It's or Britney bitch. It's just
right. Amazing. And when people see that M.R, I was like, okay, is that Mr.? Do people think that too?
Yes, sometimes.
They probably do. They probably do.
You think what you want. M. Night Shyamalan. I'm like, I don't know what that M stands for, but it sure is fancy at the beginning of his name. So mine is M.R. M.R. Chibbi Orduña.
Cool. All right. I'm going to give you the screen
Oh, poem.
And then we gonna come on back. I'm gonna give it to you.
Okay. Okay, cool. So like I said, I'm usually a very animated person, and finding stillness in my life is challenging. But there is this one place where for me, time just kind of stops. The world stops. That I love. I absolutely love this place. It's kind of a sanctuary. It's called Hippie Hollow. And if anybody in the Central Texas, for anyone that's not in the Central Texas area and does not know about it, Hippie Hollow is a state park on the banks of Lake Travis. It is a clothing optional state park. So my husband and I frequent it on the regular during the summer months, which is 10 months out of the year in Texas, by the way. And just kind of like, it's a little sanctuary. And so this poem was written there because I just love it there. So, heaven is a beach with no sand. At least that's what I like to call it, because a nudist park that edges rocks along a strip of Lake Travis is too much to explain to someone that ultimately doesn't care about the places I go to that feel like the infinite of afterlife. So, nudist beach will have to do. Brown blue water, sparkling to blinding extent in temperatures that force us to lizard over gray rocks or lion seal on the cove of someone's ship mast, so foreign and so right. I wonder how this new feels both good and yuck. See, I see some stranger things staring behind the safety of sunglasses, their whispers carrying across the dead clamshells that wind chime under barren rock ledges. We are only judged when free. In a world that is so full of assholes, these don't hide behind fabric opinions as resilient as the trees refusing to give up in this heat. I find the most forgotten cove, floating with the washed up debris of upchurned lake beds by boats waving by with wandering eyes, and think good or bad. Just the fact that they're talking about me means I matter when I want nothing more than to disappear and be seen. Once we accept this, it gets easier to get on living without apology. I've never felt more honest as when I was baking, ass up and sizzling, cooking hide out in the open. I come here for the sun to rim me, never mind the oogling douche rockets, realizing it is okay to never need what others want you to have. When I finally forget that they are there, I ripple without wonder. Here I am, no longer a posture of apology, shrugging without the weight of permission, too heavy to soar, too sore to climb, sun-dried and slick. I float like trumpet solos over cherry moon ripples, tiny as an awkward moment. Needless to say, life is just a waiting room for bliss. And I am learning to be spoiled darlings in the thicket of dried switches, the most weightless everything, sugar for the microcosms. Thank you.
People can't see me back screaming, but I'm over here like this. Oh my God. Yes, that was amazing.
Thank you.
Yes.
No, thank you. Oh my God. Like I said, the night I met Chibbi online during an online poetry slam that he was hosting. I was one of the judges. And like right before the slam, like we did like an hour before the slam, we did a sound check.
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, and a tech check. And then like, as soon as I was done with my part, I was like, I like this person. And I started like Googling him at that point. I was like, oh my God, I love his poems.
That's funny.
No, then I saw him on final stage at SIPS, an international poetry slam, as one of the features, doing an erotic poem. And everybody that's around me knows how much I love and enjoy very good erotic poems.
For anybody in the Texas area, I'll be featuring at an erotic poetry night in Dallas, second Friday of December. Just throwing that out there. Anywho.
Shit, wait a minute. Damn, I got people coming to town. Otherwise,
okay, I'm gonna say, can we make this trip to Texas like sooner rather than later?
Yeah, come through.
I'm here for it. I had one question. The one question I wrote down while you were talking is that we were discussing hosting, how much hosting you do in person. How did you find the transition to doing it online?
It's an interesting, it's a good question. And I also see we have a question, I think, from the audience.
Yeah, don't worry, we're going to get to that one.
Yeah, it's an
analysis question.
It's weird. Let's just acknowledge it's weird. It's awkward. It's weird.
Yeah.
Because it's me alone in a room with a computer in front of me, right? And then as soon as like it's done, it's like, okay, thanks everybody, bye.
Yeah.
Right, and then it's over. And usually at in-person events, like after it's over, then comes the best part of the poetry night is the community, right? You start talking to each other and getting to know each other, and that space, and not having that was really weird. But at the same time, I was like, wait, I can get paid and I don't even have to leave my house. I don't even have to put on pants. I can wear my maternity pants.
Come on with it.
Come through.
I ain't mad at that. So navigating it has been interesting. There's definitely been more successful and less successful events. I do find the ones where one can see the audience is great. Whenever I'm doing workshops, virtual workshops or virtual features, if at all possible, I always ask for people watching to turn on their cameras. I like to see who I'm in community with. So that's part of, like, again, trying to continue this idea of community building and establishing a community. And then like KaNikki, like we talked about, I got really comfortable having a teleprompter, right, with my poetry just scrolling across the screen. So both good and bad, but I think that was the biggest thing, to where my introverted heart was super happy that I just get to stay home and don't have to deal with everything. But then the part that does enjoy being in community really missed that. And so did my writing, because I find that I get most inspired by external forces, right? I'm not the kind of person that can just sit there and be like, let me think about what I want to write today. It's like, ooh, something happens, or someone said something, or I see something that then inspires a poem. And seeing nothing except my TV screen and my dog, like for so many months, I was like, I don't have anything to write about. And so it took a lot of workshops and just started generating stuff that way. So yeah.
Yes.
I think I found it not difficult seems too harsh of a word, but it's the only one that come to mind right now, that there's an inherent level of energy that the live audience gives the artist.
Yeah.
And when you're hosting online, you have to host and give the artist that energy.
100%. And that's what performing virtually, I found much more of an easier transition than hosting virtual, because I host a twice a month virtual slam, and that is so much more exhausting than hosting an in-person slam. So much more exhausting. And if I can,
because you don't get to sit down either.
Oh no, I'm sitting down the whole time.
No, I mean, like when you're hosting in person, you can get up and say, "And next to the mic, girl genius," and then you get to sit down.
Yeah,
but you're there
or
the
walk
whole
to
time.
the back of the room, or
but to your point, Sherry, it is that like you're feeding off of the audience, right? So you are not responsible for the energy of the whole show. the audience is doing their part to create that energy. When you're hosting in the virtual space, there is no audience. So you, the host, are responsible for the energy of the whole show.
Yeah.
You know, so it's very draining, and I always find myself very exhausted afterwards. But quick plug on the virtual slam, we're actually starting a virtual slam league, a whole tournament where we're giving away a lot of money in virtual competitions. And I think that's all I can say right now because we haven't officially announced it, but that starts in January. Be on the lookout.
Oh, perfect. Nice. Okay.
That makes me happy.
Yeah.
Okay, and for those that have been with us before or who may not know, this is a women-led artistic experience, but we do have a silent male member, and this question comes from him.
This dissertation.
I loved this interview. Thank you for sharing so much that is inspiring and that I can relate to. And your opening piece was mad truth and absolute fire. There were plenty of bars I wanted to post in chat, but I was still driving. You've talked about how young people in college settings have responded positively to inspiration on your poetry and in person in general.
Hey, read the chat to get the rest of the question.
I have to go read the chat to get the rest of the question.
I did the move with the copy paste because here we go.
I see it.
Okay. Oh, I see it. It's in the back chat. It's the back chat. I was wondering if you get the same reception in other settings, such as rallies or other justice events from older folks. Perhaps think of poetry as quiet readings than our performance art as spoken word.
That's a really great question. Let me see. Yes, I do get similar reactions, even in situations where people may not be familiar with the style of spoken word performance poetry thing. And I'll give you an example. Every year there's a national conference called AWP, which stands for the Association of Writers and Writing Programs. And it is a very academia, page poet saturated, and not just page poet, but page, right? It's poetry, fiction, nonfiction, all of that. It's very academia saturated. And in 2020, it was here in San Antonio. And because of an organization that I work with here, they were able to get a lot of us local writers free passes to it, which is great because it's also not cheap to attend. So it was in my backyard and I got to go for free. And so we hosted a little side event highlighting local San Antonio and Texas authors. And so for part of that, I'm always the driving force of like, let's just show the people what we do. So myself and our good friend Vocab and our good friend Rooster decided to do a group piece for them. And they did not know what hit them, but they still like appreciate and loved it. Because it's so different from how everybody else is reading their poetry at these kinds of events. So yeah, I think ultimately because the message in the poetry still lands. The delivery, how it gets delivered, even if it may be foreign to an audience, ultimately the message transcends that. And then too, I say in my sets, whenever I'm doing featured sets, like if you hear something that you want to have a further conversation about, come talk to me. You know, if you disagree with something I said, I'd be more than willing to have a conversation. And if you, cis white male het poet person, is not feeling my poetry, well, these poems aren't for you, friend. There's plenty out there for you. You know, right? Agreed. My job is to talk about my own experiences, and in that, hopefully, people that have not historically or regularly seen themselves in art, in writing, and poetry, do feel a little more valid in their existence.
I want to say, if you want to write about goats and yoga, that's great. That's not what we are right now.
Right.
Not goats and yoga.
You never know. You never know
know.
with people.
You never know.
You
And
never, you
again,
really
and I don't at all look down on page poetry. Some of the most like I have a ridiculous amount of books. My emotional support pile of unread books. These page poets that just cut you, right? Just cut right at you.
Yes.
Regardless of background or anything like that. So like I don't look at people's demographics and judge them based off of that or discredit them specifically because of that. But I do try to in my own work and in the workshops that I host whenever, like bringing in master texts to analyze, I do try to champion historically marginalized voices. So women, people of color, queer writers, indigenous writers, all of that.
But that's also the reason why on my segment I talk about books, specifically books. Like I pull in artists who have other products, but I started with talking about books because I needed people to realize like there's nothing wrong with but people who write on page. There's nothing wrong with page poets or otherwise. There's a art to this writing thing that has to be done somewhere.
Yeah. The number of times I've cried reading an Ada Limon poem, like, oh my God, like there's powerful work out there that can live on the page and be just as powerful as spoken word, and it takes
absolutely.
It's apples and oranges. It's different muscles. And I find that the ones that are really seeing the most, I hate to use the word success, but the ones that are really building bridges and getting out there the most and seeing, I guess, success are the people that are able to do both so well,
Yeah.
The Dinesh Smiths of this world, the Brandy Boys, the Patricia Smiths,
Yes.
Yeah, we love Dinesh.
Both of them, absolutely.
We love Dinesh.
Yes.
We do. We love Dinesh very much.
So Danielle, did you have another question other than the famous question that we always get you to ask everybody?
I don't. I have a couple of comments, not necessarily questions, but number one, I would point out that I have a brand new and deeper level of appreciation for you and your work. Like, I really do. Like, I liked you a lot before, and I was advocating up front, like, we need to have you on the show from the time I met you. And I'm listening to some things I didn't know. And I'm like, I just want to point out, I really have a deeper level of appreciation for everything that you do in the grand sphere of things. And I'm hoping we cross paths more often. So, ladies, we need to go to Texas. we need to make a trip. We just discussed this yesterday. We were talking about like trips and things, and like who we
places we need to go, things we need to do.
Yeah,
run the streets and be a poet. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say. Because during the SIPS week, I was not around, and I was at final stage, and I could just be in the audience as Sherry. Like I could just sit back and listen and not be asked to do anything, because I host slams. I host a slam here, a love and erotic themed poetry slam. I host open mic. I host. And it seems like I'm always on. I'm like, I didn't have to be on. I could just listen and take it all in. And I was so happy about that night.
It's funny. I'm usually bout managing that slam, that love and erotic slam, and I couldn't go because of SIPS. And we just got back to being in person. I had missed the first month back because I was
on vacation.
I was on vacation, and then I missed the second month because of SIPS. So we're back next week? So
week after next.
Week after next. So this is my first time going back into this thing, doing anything even close to hosting, bout managing anything. So it's going to be a weird experience.
It's the same amount of silliness, to the point that when I did show up and people recognized me, they were like, "Oh God, if I didn't, if it hadn't have been for SIPS, they're like, we'd have been where I was." And I'm like, I guess we should have talked about this with the people at SIPS about having one.
Yeah. Absolutely, we should have.
But that's another story for another day.
Yeah, the second thing I was going to say was Sherry and I were in the backstage chat talking about I was listening when you were talking about words and shit and how that whole thing started. And if anybody, we've talked about plenty of times on this show, like how this show actually started. I was like, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, the backstory words and shit sounds exactly like the backstory for this show.
Keep the mic on.
We came into the pandemic.
I was gonna say that thing when we were on there. I was definitely gonna say that's exactly how we started. But we started in March because it was Women's Month, and we was like, let's do it now. And
and I think it's because so many of us that have come through in the poetry scene. It's even in the name, right? It's a poetry scene, right? It is a community. Like it's the community that has helped us get to where we are. It's the community that continues to cultivate the next generation of voices. And so without that community, what are we, right? Writing can be a very isolating and solitary thing, but the community that creates is not. So just having to, I think we all felt the impetus to try and keep that community alive in some way, almost the responsibility of it. It's like, well, if we don't, who's going to? What's going to happen? The world's going to shut down. Like we're going to lose everything that we love so much. So yeah, we had to do something.
Very true.
When you were talking about like you're very proud of, like, I get it, because like I said, we've been doing the same thing here where it was like, okay, we've been having these conversations. We're about to close out. Technically, this is the end of our second season because we don't break this show up like that. We only break for holidays, and then we cut out for 4 to 6 weeks at the end of the year, and then kick back in like mid-January. So we've been here literally every week minus a holiday weekend. So it's a lot. It's a lot, but I appreciate the work that goes into that. I don't have like a question other than the last question.
Let's go ahead with the last question.
I'm gonna pause for a second. Unless there's something else, I'll ask it.
Yeah. If there's anybody has any questions in the chat, anyone watching has a question, feel free to go ahead and drop it in the chat. We just want to make sure. I don't see anything else.
In 5, 4.
I saw your sister in the chat, though.
3.
I saw that. We saw your sister in the chat.
2. 1. I saw Cassandra is free in the chat too. Hi, Cassandra.
Yes.
That is my poetry wife.
Who's been here? Who's been here before? She's been on my show.
All right. No further questions.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Except one question. Except one.
We got one last question from the peanut gallery.
The last one from the peanut gallery. So we always end the show with asking this one thing, which is, now that you've done the show, and now that we've talked about all the segments and things, who do you think would make a good guest on this show? Any of the segments. Keep in mind, we have a running list, and we're coming into a new season. So
let me remind you of the segments. So now we have the one that you're on right now, which is Poets and Platforms. And Girl Genius does Let's Talk About the Book, but it could be Let's Talk About the CD or something else, some kind of artistic form. And then Simply Sherry does what do you do?
From behind the microphone, because poets are people too.
Basically, what you said in the
yes, the same thing.
That's literally it.
Poets are people too.
Anything about anything.
Okay, I'm going to not give you 1, but 75.
Let's go.
Any of the guests that we've had on Words and Shit, I would absolutely recommend that you bring on the show.
Nice. I like
it. Right. Absolutely.
So just go through, scroll through the podcasts, all 75 episodes, and just, roulette that shit. Just ding, 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 ding. And you will land on someone worth having on this show.
Wait a second. And on screen, on air, I'm gonna go ahead and put Words and Shit in my podcast feed. And
there you go. Get it. Like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Rate and review us, please.
I was about to say.
Oh, wait a minute. And the discussion that we were having a little while ago about how can you support. those those 5-star reviews, and just liking and subscribing, even if for some reason you don't listen, that helps a podcaster. So do that.
Like and subscribe, rate and review wherever you get your podcasts.
Exactly.
I was about to say, listen, I work from home, so I'm here and I listen to podcasts while I'm doing things. That's going on my list.
Throw it in there. Don't judge us on the earlier episodes.
Yeah, I have time to backtrack all the earlier ones now.
There you go.
No. Chibbi, when we started on Zoom, what did we say? Our first month or so, we didn't even record.
We didn't, and we interviewed. We interviewed each other. We interviewed each other.
Not recorded. We got Zoom bombed.
Oh my God, it was awful.
Yeah. We just we did a year, a little over a year on Zoom. Oh, wait a minute. We didn't know about streaming to Facebook.
We
posted them they got posted after the fact. We
just got to StreamYard in May.
Welcome to the wonderful world that is StreamYard.
Yeah. Love it though.
I feel you, but yeah, it's been a journey and evolution. You know, like we said earlier, most of the time we're just making shit up as we go along.
Exactly.
And what works, and what doesn't. Keep going.
We used to have people in the room. We used Zoom because we had the audience members, the subscribers in the room.
Yeah.
Which was a little more intimate experience. But yeah, after getting Zoom bombed, I was like, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, we were
good.
Terrible.
It took one good time this is why we can't have nice things. It took one good time.
One good time.
That's right.
So first we're going to give everyone, please give a huge round of applause for our feature this evening, Chibbi. Thank you. So appreciate that you took the time to be with us this evening. Please, again, like, subscribe, download Words and Shit podcast. If you want to support the poet, their direct cash payments are there. If you have no money, like, subscribe, find the podcast, find their Instagram. Next week is my week, and we are doing From Behind the Microphone. Check how we did this. Check
so
how
funny.
the building happened with a makeup artist, actually, who was a poet.
who was a fire makeup artist.
Her name is Miss Jamie Beats on Instagram. So you definitely guys want to come back next week, because we're going to talk about her writing, but we're also going to talk about the transition she's made to makeup artistry, because she doesn't just do what I'm just going to say bride and glam faces. She does like costume makeup.
Yes, it's very scary.
And things.
Like she does full face costume.
Full like from
character
hair
makeup. And it's amazing.
It's so please,
I can't wait. If she comes in one of those scary things, I'm not gonna be looking at my screen. I'm gonna be scared.
She'll do something that's not. She'll
be scary.
It's not October. She only does the scary ones for October.
She does like
once a week. Like once a week during October, she was doing like horror characters. Like she did like a creepy version of Ronald McDonald. She did Chucky. She did Dr. Seuss. She did a creepy version of the Cat in the Hat. But the Chucky one, we'll talk about when she's here. I'll ask about it, because the Chucky one got picked up by Sci-Fi. Picked up by the network. Yeah. So we're really excited that she's going to be here. So everyone, please stay safe. Wash your hands. Remember, it's not just COVID out in these streets. There's the flu. There's the regular cold. So let's all do our best to stay healthy. People are gross.
I
love y'all.
Like Chibbi says,
I love y'all, but no.
Ignorant people.
Ignorant people.
The pandemic isn't over just because you're over it.
There it is.
We will see you all next Sunday. Good night.
Good night.